So this is because a lot of times that people hear about the Orthodox view, they think that it's Donatist because it tends to say that
like this is something that would need to be settled because there's a lot of inconsistency.
you have a mistaken idea as to what Donatism is.
Would you say that all baptisms within the Roman Catholic Church are devoid of grace?
The Eucharist eaten outside of the Orthodox Church or communion is a dead meal.
Not necessarily, so it all depends on... Hey, my friend was on yesterday. He was asking you about Donatism. He wanted me to come on and talk with you, so here I am. About as far as, like rebaptism within the Orthodox Church. I wouldn't necessarily go all out and just say Orthodox or Donatists, right? Because I think a little of the nuance was lost there when he came on.
Let's just make this really clear. So if I go to Athanasius in his Festal Letters and he says that the Eucharist eaten outside of the Orthodox Church or communion is a dead meal and doesn't give you any grace, is that Donatism?
Not necessarily. So it all depends on... Wouldn't it all depend on the validity of the apostolic succession and the holy orders of the priests who are consecrating that Eucharist?
Well, obviously they have holy orders if they have the attempt to have the divine liturgy outside the church.
Okay, so then it comes down to whether or not it's devoid of grace, right?
Well, what it comes down to is that you have a mistaken idea as to what Donatism is. And so this is because a lot of times that people hear about the Orthodox view, they think that it's Donatist because it tends to say that sacraments outside of the Orthodox Church are graceless. That's not Donatism. Donatism precisely is the efficacy of the sacraments depends on the worthiness of the minister. And so in other words, any sin that a minister might commit, including having a dirty thought at the point of your baptism, would invalidate your baptism. That's Donatism. Orthodox sacramentology is more precise, that we're not saying that the sins of the priest have anything to do with whether or not your baptism is gracious per se. We're saying that certain things are necessary as presuppositions to have an Orthodox sacrament, and one of those things is the Orthodox faith. That's where we differ with the Augustinian position of ex opere operato, which says that even if you lose the faith, or even if you're an atheist or a Satanist, you can still perform certain rituals and rites such as baptism. Or the Roman Catholic position that if I get ordained and that day become a Satanist for the rest of my life, I can still confect the Eucharist and blaspheme it as a Satanist. We think that's absurd, and we are not Donatists because we're consistent in saying that that's an absurd position.
Let's just use Roman Catholic because that's an easy example, right? So would you say that all baptisms within the Roman Catholic Church are devoid of grace?
Yes.
Okay, so then wouldn't that mean then that there's vast amounts of converts within like the Russian Orthodox Church and certain dioceses of the OCA where you just have unbaptized converts because they're accepting converts in?
No, because I believe that when they're received into the church, whatever defects are lacking are made up for by their reception into the church. So I don't believe that God is a legalistic bean counter. It's the Roman Catholic view that makes God into this absurd legalist, because if you don't say the words correctly in the Roman Catholic position, it's all invalidated. That's the legalistic position, not our position.
Okay.
Have you seen the recent Arizona story about the priest who his entire diocese for the last 30 years are all invalid because he said the wrong words?
No, I haven't.
Okay, it's a very famous, popular Roman Catholic story going around for the last few years in Arizona. Go look it up. That's legalism. The idea that God requires an atheist or a Muslim to baptize me, that's legalism. That's your position.
I'm not Catholic, and I'm more exploring this and trying to...
Okay, I thought you were Roman Catholic. My mistake.
No, I'm not Catholic. I'm discerning denominations right now. Like I'm more convinced of Anglicanism, but I'm not fully decided on any one thing. But
Anglicanism?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah.
You want a good trans bishop? Is that what you want?
Well, I mean, obviously 80% of the Anglican community. Well, I'm not going to come on and argue Anglicanism at the moment because I haven't even landed on one. And my friend Moore wanted me to come on and talk with you about the Donatism thing. Okay. But just to make sure that I understand what you're saying correctly, so essentially it doesn't really matter whether or not someone's baptized or not coming into the Orthodox Church.
No, they should be baptized. I didn't say it doesn't matter. I said that they should be baptized if there was a situation where, it was totally out of accord, the ritual wasn't even done correctly. It's in the Orthodox Church, it's to be determined on a local basis by the local episcopate. Now, not every local episcopate in the Orthodox Church, unfortunately, does this in a proper, faithful way. Sometimes they're ecumenists, sometimes they're lazy. But the point is that it's not, ironically, our position is not the one that's rigid and rigorous. Our position is the one that's actually flexible. It's the Roman Catholic legalist position of ex opere apparato that's the real source of the problems here. Our position, I think, is perfectly reasonable. It's supposed to be left up to the bishop to determine. But a lot of times, what complicates this is that modern day post-Novus Ordo Catholicism has gone so far from what's even remotely traditional. You've got Novus Ordo priests baptizing people in the name of the land, the sea, and the air. You've got Novus Ordo people baptizing people in the name of the Mother Earth, literally. So in those cases, and because it's getting so hard to determine whether there was any Trinitarian form at all, a lot of Orthodox churches are saying, and people are beginning to say, it might be wise to just baptize them all because things are getting so crazy. I think that's a wise discipline. So you can't boil all this down into either ors. There's a lot of nuance, and there's a lot of practical, pragmatic questions at play in this as well.
That makes sense. Like from an outside perspective, it does seem like this is something that would need to be settled because there's a lot of inconsistency across the different metropolitans.
Well, you're not going to yeah, but that quote inconsistency is precisely what we call economia. And so we don't need you, an outsider, telling us what we need to do as the one universal standard. Who are you to tell us what's supposed to be our standard?
Okay, I mean, that's valid.
Do you think you're going to find that consistency in Anglicanism?
I mean, that depends. So, and like, even if I can't find that in Anglicanism, that doesn't necessarily take the focus off of the fact that it exists within Orthodoxy, right? So, like,
wrong.
That what exists?
Really, like, the fact that that's an inconsistency, right? So,
I didn't say it's an inconsistency. I said it's called economia. Do you even know what that is?
Yeah, like household, family, basically, right?
No, you don't know so you don't know what that is.
Or economy, economy, right.
So in other words, as I said a minute ago, the local bishop is supposed to be able to determine when and where and how you apply the canons. This is a canonical canon law question as to how people are received. And different people are received in different ways because people's cases are different. So, for example, if a Monophysite is baptized in the exact Orthodox way, if that Monophysite person renounces their heresy, many bishops can and have decided to receive them without rebaptizing or, quote, baptizing them. Because if the ritual is done correctly, then what's the impediment is the heresy. Once the heresy is removed, the baptism becomes efficacious when they join the church.
Okay, so then areas where you have an entire, an entire church within Orthodoxy, I don't know what the exact correct term for that is, but you have the Russian Orthodox.
You're talking about jurisdictions.
Okay, when you have a specific jurisdiction that, with a broad brush says we recognize Roman Catholic holy orders, and so they don't practice, they don't baptize converts from Catholicism.
You're missing the point, though. Recognizing does not necessarily say that those things are gracious. It's saying that the ritual is done correctly, and when they join the Orthodox Church, the impediments to the grace are removed. By the way, did you know that's actually the Augustinian position? So even though we disagree about ex opere apparato, nobody in the modern Roman Catholic or Protestant world or Anglican world actually follows the Augustinian position, which we are actually on this point closer to, which says that the impediment to the grace is the heresy. So even though Augustine believes that there's valid baptisms and even gracious baptisms outside the church, if you persist in the heresy, it doesn't get you anywhere. So we're actually closer to the Augustinian position on that point than anyone else is.
Yeah, that much makes sense. So because I get,
so you're confusing different jurisdictions having decentralized different approaches to as if there's theological error and confusion everywhere.
Well, then maybe help me parse through this then, because the whole thing is that, so I get the fact that, the grace becomes efficacious or whatever the exact particular language you used was there when they come in. And, it seems like the standard way of receiving heretics is confession, absolution, right? You accept them in. And
no, that's not true. So you don't know the canon law, the ancient canons. The canons of the Sixth Council, for example, give us different strictures and different approaches to different heretics depending upon their case. So this is why it's a canon law issue. It's very complex at times because of all the different sects. This wouldn't be complex if we didn't have 1,000 different crazy heresies doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And if we didn't have nuanced, complex issues in people's lives and in church history. So again, the Orthodox position is flexible on how to receive converts and heretics and schismatics from any different group. If we take in a Roman Catholic and the bishops determine that, they don't have to be whatever because the rituals were done correctly or whatever. That does not say or necessitate we're saying that they had the grace that whole time. It just simply means that the ritual is done correctly, it does not need to be redone, and the impediment to the grace is now removed.
Yeah, I get that, and I don't want to come across like I understand the position that it would be nuanced and you take it on a case-by-case basis. It's a tenable, like I totally.
Do you know what canon law is?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah,
so
like
Orthodox canon law is different from Roman Catholic canon law, and it's different from Anglican canon law. And so because it's nuanced and complex, and it goes back through all of the 7 ecumenical councils and all the different canons that they have about the reception of heretics, there's a lot of confusion about different heretical groups. That's the source of confusion, is all these heretics. So that's why it's up to the local bishops to make those determinations. And because it's decentralized, it can lead to or give the impression that, oh, you guys don't have one consistent position on how to receive people. We got you. But in reality, the Roman Catholic position, because it thinks and prefers to have this single unitary position on this, actually leads to more stupid positions, like the idea that atheists and Muslims can baptize people.
So, because I was saying, I get like the fact of dealing with it on case-by-case basis. You know, you evaluate each person, like a Miaphysite or a Monophysite that you call them. You accept them because, you know, as long as you can validate that the actual formula used and the underlying, you know, the consideration. But you still obviously have to accept them in, and at that point, it becomes gracious. But that's a case-by-case basis. That's what you're saying right now. But you're saying actually case by case on each bishop, like an entire region.
That's what economia means.
Yeah, that just leads to then.
There's not a universal application of the canons in the Orthodox Church. Economia means that the bishops apply the canons to the situation.
But so that's just essentially that's saying that it's not a settled matter on this.
No, your assumption is that it's possible to have a settled matter on a complex matter that is precisely left up to a decentralized church in the Orthodox world. And the very question that you have is assuming the Roman Catholic tendency towards there being a universal position on this, which I'm saying is what led to all their stupid stuff.
Yeah.
So when this comes up in the Augustinian disputes, this eventually leads the Roman position to dogmatizing 3 things necessary for a sacrament. Do you know what those are?
No, not off the top of my head.
Matter, form, and intention. So that means that anytime matter, form, and intention are there, you have the genuine celebration of the sacrament and the grace. That's why it leads to the position that because baptism is necessary, if I don't have a Roman Catholic or even an Orthodox person around, if I want to become a Catholic, I can go to an atheist and I can get the atheist to baptize me. This is because of the seeking for a universal resolution to a complex issue that's economia.
But matter, form, and intention are either there or not there, right? So,
but you just now learned that. You don't even know how. But that's itself leads to the stupidity of this position, because you know what intention means in that matter, form, and intention?
Yeah, like what? Did you actually have, you know, intending to properly perform the sacrament? Did you have the proper understanding of, you know, like a Mormon might say Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, but they don't actually mean a true Trinitarian form. Is that what that's?
Well,
correct?
It's not even that, because they realize that an atheist is not going to have the intention of true belief in the Trinity. And so what the Roman Catholic Church dogmatized was the intention to do what the church does, which is retarded. But so in other words, if an atheist, so now if I'm going to get baptized by an atheist, all I need the atheist to do is to baptize me in the form of the Trinity, for him to intend to do what the church does. And this is absurd.
And that's why I didn't include. I tried to include, you know, a more digestible example than an atheist, obviously, because I don't think an atheist could give a proper baptism. But so let's make it.
The reason I brought that up was to say that The idea that you can have a universal answer to these types of church law questions is precisely what led to the definition of matter, form, and intention, and trying to give a scientific universal definition of when a sacrament is practiced. That's my point.